The Elephant's Child, a Just So story by Rudyard Kipling, retold and illustrated by Shoo Rayner. Long, long ago, at the very beginning of time, when everything was just getting sorted out, the elephant had only a stumpy, bulgy nose, as big as a boot. He could wriggle it about from side to side, but he couldn't pick things up with it. There was one elephant, a new elephant, an elephant's child, who was full of insatiable curiosity, which made him ask ever so many questions. He asked his tall aunt, the ostrich, why her tail feathers grew just so. He asked his tall uncle, the giraffe, what made his skin so spotty. He asked his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, why her eyes were red. And he asked his hairy uncle, the baboon, why melons tasted so good. But none of them paid him any attention. He asked questions about everything that he saw or heard or felt or smelt or touched. No one paid him any attention, but he was still full of insatiable curiosity. Insatiable curiosity. Insatiable means a hunger that cannot be satisfied. Curiosity means to have hunger to know about something. How much? Why? What? How? When? What if? What for? The elephant's child had such a hunger for knowledge he could never be satisfied with the answers he got. One fine morning, the insatiable elephant's child asked, "What does the crocodile have for dinner?" Everybody said, "Hush," and paid him no more attention. But the colo bird said, with a mournful cry, "Go to the banks of the great grey-green, greasy Limpopo river, all set about with fever trees, and find out." Great rivers of the world. The Limpopo is in southern Africa. It is sometimes known as the Crocodile River. The Limpopo is very slow. It ends at the port of Zai in the Indian Ocean in the country of Mozambique. The very next morning, the insatiable elephant's child packed 100 pounds of bananas, 100 pounds of sugar cane, and 17 melons. He said to his dear family, who paid him no attention, "Goodbye. I am going to the great grey-green, greasy Limpopo river, all set about with fever trees, to find out what the crocodile has for dinner." He went on his way, eating all the time and throwing the skins about because he could not pick them up. At last he came to the banks of the great grey-green, greasy Limpopo river, all set about with fever trees, precisely as the colo bird had said. Now, You must know and understand that this insatiable elephant's child had never seen a crocodile and did not know what one looked like. The first thing he found was a bi-coloured python rock snake curled round a rock. "Excuse me," said the elephant's child most politely, "but have you seen a crocodile in these parts?" "Have I seen a crocodile?" said the bi-coloured python rock snake in a voice of dreadful scorn. "What will you ask me next?" "Excuse me," said the elephant's child most politely, "but could you kindly tell me what he has for dinner?" The bi-coloured python rock snake uncoiled himself, turned his back to the sun, and paid him no more attention. The elephant's child said goodbye very politely and went on his way, eating melons and throwing the rinds about because he could not pick them up. Then, at the very edge of the great grey-green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, he trod on what he thought was a log. But it was really the crocodile who winked one eye. "Excuse me," said the elephant's child most politely, "but do you happen to have seen a crocodile in these parts?" The crocodile winked the other eye and lifted half his tail out of the mud. "Come closer, little one," said the crocodile. "Why do you ask such things?" "Excuse me," said the elephant's child most politely, pleased that someone was paying attention. "No one else will answer me." "Come closer, little one," said the crocodile, "for I am the crocodile," and he wept crocodile tears to show it was quite true. The elephant's child grew excited and kneeled down on the bank and said, "You are the very person I have been looking for. Will you please tell me what you have for dinner?" "Come closer, little one," said the crocodile, "and I'll whisper." The elephant's child put his head down close to the crocodile's musky, tusky mouth, and the crocodile caught him by his little nose, which up to that moment had been no bigger than a boot and just about as useful. "I think," said the crocodile through gritted teeth, "I think today I will begin with the elephant's child." The elephant's child was much annoyed, and he spoke through his nose. "Let go! You are hurting me!" Then the bi-coloured python rock snake scuffled down the bank and said, "Pull as hard as ever you can, or he'll pull you into those grey-green, greasy waters before you can say Jack Robinson." The elephant's child sat back on his little haunches and pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose began to stretch. The crocodile floundered in the water, making it all creamy with great sweeps of his tail, and he pulled and pulled and pulled. The elephant's child spread all his little forelegs and pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose kept on stretching. The crocodile thrashed his tail like an oar, and he pulled and pulled and pulled. With each pull, the elephant's child's nose grew longer and longer, and it hurt him something hideous. The elephant's child felt his legs slipping, and he said through his nose, which was now nearly 5 feet long, "This is too much for me." Then the bi-coloured python rock snake knotted himself in a double clove hitch round the elephant's child's back legs and pulled. The crocodile pulled and pulled, but the elephant's child and the bi-coloured python rock snake pulled hardest. At last, the crocodile let go of the elephant's child's nose with a plop that you could hear all up and down the Limpopo River. The elephant's child wrapped his nose up in cool banana leaves and hung it in the great grey-green greasy Limpopo to cool. He sat there for 3 days waiting for his nose to shrink, but it never grew any shorter. At the end of the 3rd day, a fly stung him on the shoulder, and before he knew what he was doing, he lifted up his trunk and squashed that fly with the end of it. "Advantage number 1, said the bi-coloured python rock snake. "You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Now try and eat a little." The elephant's child put out his trunk and plucked a large bundle of grass, dusted it clean against his forelegs, and stuffed it into his mouth. "Advantage number 2, said the bi-coloured python rock snake. "You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Don't you think the sun is very hot?" "It is," said the elephant's child, putting out his trunk and slooping up a sloop of mud from the banks of the great grey-green, greasy Limpopo. He slapped it on his head, where it made a cool, sloopy, sloshy mud cap, all trickly behind his ears. "Advantage number 3, said the bi-coloured python rock snake. "You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose." So the elephant's child went home across Africa, frisking and whisking his trunk, and when he wanted to eat, he pulled fruit down from a tree, and when he wanted grass, he plucked it up from the ground. He felt so happy, he sang to himself down his trunk, and the noise was louder than several brass bands. Brass bands. Instruments you will find in a brass band. 8 to 10 cornets, 1 flugelhorn, 4 tubas, 3 tenor horns, 3 baritones, 3 euphoniums, 3 trombones. One dark evening, he came back to his dear family, who ignored him and paid him no attention, even though he'd been away. He coiled up his trunk and blew so loud and so long they had to pay attention. "Oh, bananas," they said. "Where did you learn that trick? And what have you done to your nose?" "I got a new one from the crocodile on the banks of the great grey, green, greasy Limpopo River," said the elephant's child. "I asked him what he had for dinner, and he gave me this to keep." Then he showed off all the things he could do with his nose, while his family paid him close attention. Things you can do with your nose: sneeze, smell flowers, sniff in a loud and annoying manner, wiggle your nostrils, try it, scrunch it up. They were so excited that they went off one by one in a hurry to the banks of the great grey-green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, to borrow new noses from the crocodile. And ever since that day, all the elephants you will ever see, besides all those that you won't, have trunks precisely like the trunk of the insatiably curious elephant's child. If you enjoyed this book, then you'll want to know there are more Just So stories retold in a fresh, easy, modern style by Shoo Rayner, available now on Amazon as both paperback and Kindle ebook. Listen to Shoo read the stories on www.learnenglishthroughstory.com.